Okay, we have to deal today with what is unfortunately an increasingly repeated conspiracy theory about Joe Biden and Ukraine that's spreading as a result of the recent new Trump collusion allegation, which is that Donald Trump is withholding hundreds of millions of dollars in aid from Ukraine until such time that Ukraine decides to help Trump smear Joe Biden in order to help him win, Trump that is, in the 2020 election. And the reason that I have to do this is in part because some of the mainstream outlets that have reported this, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, didn't properly debunk the conspiracy theory, and it's getting even more oxygen. Now, the other important thing to know is that the new conspiracy theory about Joe Biden is not new. This is something that far-right websites have been pushing for a while now, but it has recently exploded, so let's get into it. The idea is Joe Biden, in a completely corrupt, cronyistic act, went to Kiev, Ukraine, and threatened to withhold $1 billion in loan guarantees because a company that his son Hunter Biden is associated with was being investigated by the Ukrainian chief prosecutor, Viktor Shokin. Now, if you don't look beyond that one-line conspiracy theory, it is very easy to fall for it because it's true that Joe Biden went to Kiev in 2015. It's true that Joe Biden was involved in discussions related to the actions of the chief prosecutor. It's true that Joe Biden was one of the people that threatened to withhold loan guarantees. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are and what your priorities are, this lacks incredibly important context. Let's start by looking at this video that many of the conspiracy theorists are claiming is proof of everything that I just told you. Check it out. A smoking gun of sorts, they say about this video.
I was, not but it just happened to be, that was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones. So I got Ukraine. And I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
That is their smoking gun, or smocking gun, to use the vocabulary of the current president. So let me talk about context. We often hear from people who are caught doing something wrong or saying something wrong, and they have to apologize. They will sometimes say, oh, no, what I said was taken out of context. And often it makes no sense. Like in a lot of these situations, there is no possible context that would change the meaning of what was said, unless the context was they said right before, what I'm about to say is a total joke and I don't mean it, right? Like the whole context argument falls very flat. In this case, Joe Biden was one of many people involved in an international coalition that was investigating corruption and embezzlement and misconduct in Ukraine involving the chief prosecutor. Joe Biden ended up as a point man for this multinational effort, and many countries had already been asking for the dismissal of the Ukrainian chief prosecutor months before Joe Biden even became the point man. And again, this got some pickup in right-wing media, but it had never really taken off. And now we find out that Rudy Giuliani is Donald Trump's henchman. He's going to Ukraine and pushing them to get this Biden smear going. And as time goes, the allegations about Joe Biden become even more outrageous. For example, there's a version of this conspiracy that Biden personally was blackmailing Ukrainian leadership into getting rid of the chief prosecutor merely to derail the investigation into this company with which Joe Biden's son is associated, a Ukrainian gas company. Only the most myopic, limited understanding of what happened could even possibly get you to that conclusion. And of course, when Donald Trump has an actual new scandal on his hands involving Ukraine, that he's withholding $250 million in aid unless Ukraine smears Biden, it's an environment that is ripe for counter conspiracies like this one about Joe Biden. Now, I want to be really clear. This is not a defense of Joe Biden's policy. This is not an endorsement of Joe Biden's presidential candidacy. This is not a denial that Joe Biden, as vice president of the United States for 8 years, was part of the status quo center-left establishment that we are trying to replace with something more progressive in 2020. This is not a defense of any particular campaign position of Joe Biden. I'm merely telling you that the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and right-wing media is alleging exists is flat out false. And it's quite frankly ridiculous. And actually, it's so ridiculous that even Fox News hosts are challenging it on Fox News broadcasts. I will tell you about that later on in the program. We'll take a quick break. Make sure you're following the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. And while you're there, follow me on Instagram at david.pakman.